took longer than most people to do it. Welcome to Stolen Tonic.
I wasn't sure if you were going to say something. Yeah.
No, it's okay.
I was waiting.
Oh my goodness. But hi.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm well.
Welcome, everybody, to Soul and Tonic. My guest today is my very dear, longtime friend of 10 years.
Yeah.
It's been 10 years.
It'll be 11 in September.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I know our friendship anniversary. I know the news though. So.
Oh my goodness. Well, Amanda Torres, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for asking me to be here. I am very excited to do something like this with you. I feel like this is very much in line with how our friendship is, and I wish we could have had one all on our own forever and ever ago. Actually, it would have been good.
That would have been great. But, better late than never.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. So right now you're living in Nashville. Remind me, what is it exactly that you're doing these days?
So I am a case manager for survivors of human trafficking. I assist them after they've gotten out of the life. We don't like to use the word rescue, right? They weren't rescued. And I just assist them with making sure they have everything they need, work on coping skills, make sure that they are just able to process like what they've gone through, and just provide that space for them to heal. And so part of what that looks like is making sure that they have all of their baseline needs met, like Maslow's hierarchy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything that they need is provided for so that they can get out of survival mode. So we start with that.
That sounds extremely challenging, but rewarding.
It is. It can be really dark. You hear a lot of personal stories about things that you think are only in scary movies, and you definitely have to have time to process those things. But thankfully, End Slavery Tennessee in Nashville is a wonderful, wonderful organization that helps to pay for some of our therapy for us to process.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, they're super, they care a lot. They care a lot about their employees. So it's been the best organization I've worked for. So that's a plug. You should go check them out, people.
Oh man, I will add links down into the description below so that anyone who's interested in looking into this organization can do so. That's incredible. That's really difficult work, but something that I know, just from our friendship, like a not surprising thing for you to end up doing, since it's kind of been a consistent like caring for people and wanting to help those in need in this particular field. So, yeah, and you're doing it. It's amazing.
I know, it's crazy. I've been working towards this kind of job specifically for years. And for a little while, I wasn't sure that it was going to happen. Just things in life kept, taking different turns, and I'm finally here. But the thing is, I would not have been as ready as I currently am if I had gotten a job like this earlier. I had a lot of things that I had to learn and that I had to work through personally for me to be in a place where I can do this kind of difficult job. So I'm so thankful that I didn't get this before, even though it's what I had really wanted at the time.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. Mm. Well, so from our years of friendship, we've had a lot of different conversations uh, concerning, life and faith and all sorts of different elements of our lives, and being able to open up and share with each other just kind of this ongoing faith journey. And one of those things that we've kind of shared that I haven't really had in common with a lot of people here in Kansas City is kind of that experience of the Southern Evangelical culture,
Yeah.
culture, uh, English hard. Uh, so just kind of getting an overview from you, like what was it like for you growing up in Southern Evangelical culture? And for me, because I want to help like understand this more on a personal level, what was it like specifically for you as a female growing up in Southern Evangelical culture? Because I feel like my experience is very much filtered by my gender, by being a man. So I would like to just kind of jump words. Ugh, English. Ugh, I hate English. On my hair. It's getting bad. It's getting so long. Also, side note, I am so red that my camera keeps trying to color correct me to a blue. Just because my skin tone and my hair is so red, I keep trying to change it, and I hate it. So just ignore the ongoing shifting of the color of my skin. So
It's okay. I didn't even notice until you said so, and now I see it. But it's okay. Yeah, so oh gosh, there's so much to it. Where to start exactly? So I do not want to in any way bash and or demonize, so to speak, Southern evangelical culture as a whole. There's a lot of things that are really good. There are some really strong believers within that culture who genuinely love God, and they're doing their best. And so I want to say that first. When I say these things, I am not coming from a place of disdain or just I love many people. I love many people in that culture, and to some extent, I am also still a part of it because I'm here. And so, I want to promote unity within the body of Christ first and foremost. So, as we are talking about these things, let us remember that each kind of culture and subculture of Christianity has its own flaws and toxic ways. So, as we delve into this, may we all think of our own things first before we decide to think of others. So, but I am going to tell you about my personal experience. So, Southern evangelical culture. So as a woman, you hear a lot from the time that you're a little girl that women don't talk in church and women don't speak in church. And it feels like anything feminine is looked down upon always. And I can say that there are some churches that do a better job of not doing that. But as a child, it was something that I picked up on immediately. And if you can pick up on something like that as a kid, it's got to be pretty obvious, And I remember thinking, man, I don't want to go to the girls group, or I don't want to be a part of a women's group ever. And I actually think you and I have talked about this in the past, where I just was always, anytime girls got together to do something girly, I didn't really like it,
Yeah.
because I grew up thinking that it was lesser or dumb because it was girly. Because you see men and boys in the church constantly picking at things like that, to the point that, women's groups and women's Bible studies are looked at as lesser and less theological and less spiritual. And this is just my opinion and from what I've seen, and the way that I grew up, than a men's Bible group, where they're doing the real studying, whereas the women are doing some sort of like talking about women problems, because women problems are, again, somehow not real problems.
Hmm.
And I think we see that in our broader culture as well in America, where if you're not a man and, oh gosh, I don't even really want to get into this, the whole like white man privilege thing, like,
Mm.
and no offense to you, I don't.
I'm a ginger.
You're red. I forgot. Um,
We're
so
we're a blight upon our own community. So
like, it's just a true statement, and not from an unloving place. It's just one of those things that just is right now in our world. And I also hate what's happened where, white men have also been demonized. It's like, we're supposed to be helping and unifying, not attacking and dividing.
yeah,
So everybody calm down, pull yourself together, and speak peacefully to people who don't understand things. And that's not to say that all of white men don't understand, because clearly here we are, right? It's not true by a
yeah,
long shot. It's just there's this broad issue of people speaking ill towards other groups, and it's no good. But anyways,
yeah. I think well, for me, being a white man, um, not really something I can escape. It's just what I am, and recognizing that, yeah, there is, to some degree, there is the white male privilege that I don't fully get for myself, even as a white man. But I recognize that I do come from a different place because of it, and it took me a long time to get there. I recognize that there was a difference in the way that maybe how I'm looked at versus somebody else of a different skin tone or a different gender, and that took a really long time for me to embrace the reality that life kind of sucks, but even with it sucking, um, I'm still coming to the game with a little bit of a handicap,
mhm.
um, which makes me sad. And I really like if people feel ill towards me, um, I would prefer that they didn't. I would prefer that people got the chance to know me first before they made assumptions. But
Right.
I to a degree, I understand why. I do get kind of that reaction because there are plenty of people out there who have perpetuated the stereotype and kind of set things up for for the white man to look as bad as they do. so
Right.
so I think there's an element of being justified in people's frustration and distrust off the bat. So I mean, on a personal note, like I've experienced more abuse and manipulation and all that from white men than I have any other combination,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's crazy to think about how even people who are just like us, as far as where we come from and what we look like, are they're just as dangerous, so to speak, or just
Mhm.
critical or just as unkind or abusive. And I would definitely say that's true with women as a group and men also. But I feel like it is getting a little bit better, but just being so critical of each other and competitive in a way that's obviously not healthy, putting each other down or judging each other for what we're wearing or not wearing, what our makeup looks like, because I feel like now more than ever, that's a really big thing.
Yeah.
Seeing people look at other people and put it on social media how they are criticizing
Yeah.
other women for not doing their makeup like they should, not using, like, not contouring well, or that's not how you do it. Instead of saying, hey, I have some tips for you if this is something that you even want. But if you like your makeup the way that it is, that's fine.
Hmm.
Because honestly, is makeup made to be put on a right way? Or is it just
Yeah.
an art form, so to speak?
I mean, I don't have as much experience in that department, but
Yeah.
I understand there's a lot of like rules. But I mean, there's a lot of rules with clothing as well. I mean, there's
Sure.
the way that people react to the way people dress um, is often extremely cruel and not actually rooted in anything that makes sense. Just kind of oh, this is how it should be according to how it's been for 2 decades or 3 decades or whatever. So
Mhm. And I think I may have mentioned this to you already. I'm hearing that Gen Z is saying that skinny jeans are out. And I'm like, don't attack my skinny jeans.
one of
I like
my I was having dinner with one of my former students the other day,
Mhm.
and with his wife, and she was scrolling through Instagram, and she came across that statement that Gen Z was saying that skinny jeans. She was like, "What? Why? Why are we listening to you? Like, that's insane. No, you're not getting rid of skinny jeans."
Well, I'm gonna wear my skinny jeans because it's what I like,
Hmm.
and that's the end of that. And if it's not in, well, that's just too bad. I trust that I will be loved and accepted by those who love and accept me without following the
Yep.
trend.
See,
Um,
this is why I can't get into fashion photography. I'll do all the other photography, but the fashion stuff, eh,
yeah.
they're too bound.
And like it kind of goes into, hey, everybody's allowed to like what they like, regardless of whether you like it or agree with it. And that's okay. So please just be respectful, period.
Yeah,
No, there's no criticism necessary, you know? But we're kind of veering off subject here. Um,
slightly. But that does lead me to my next question. So, pouring more coffee. This episode brought to you by coffee.
right?
Not an actual sponsor, but my God, it's the thing that keeps me going. Um, I yeah. So growing up, obviously, there's a bit of a difference in terms of like expectations for how men and women dress in church and stuff.
Mhm.
And I feel like your experience is probably a bit more strict than mine because guys don't have as many rules where we're from, like in church settings or whatever. At least that's how I feel. I remember, I mean, well, when we went to our school, we had the dress code. I do remember the female dress code being a bit longer than the guys' dress code. So, especially after they finally allowed guys to wear earrings. But, um, which was I think it was my second year. I think it was during my sophomore year that finally became allowed. So, but yeah, so what is that like? How did that influence your spiritual journey? Just having like, or and maybe you see it differently than I do, that you have like different set of rules or longer, stricter set of rules or
Sure,
things like that.
sure, sure. Here's kind of how I feel. And this is what I feel gets a little bit controversial, even in the Christian world now, probably now more than ever. Yeah, I'm going to stand by that. So I believe that regardless of what a woman is wearing, no one should sexualize her. And the sexualization of a person is on the person who is doing it and no one else. That's my personal belief around that. I believe that I am responsible for me. No one else is responsible for me and my feelings. No
Yeah.
one's responsible for you and your feelings. We are responsible for ourselves. And if we make other people responsible for our feelings, then we make them responsible for our thoughts and actions. And that's just not true. I don't think that like there's something to be said for when somebody treats you a certain way, like your reaction may be understandable, right? Provoking someone is not a good thing to do because you're making it easier for them to do whatever that it is, like whether it's provoking them to anger or if you were like just anything, right? Excuse me. And so sorry, my goodness, like my voice.
It flew away.
Water. So, yeah, there's something to be said for that, but that doesn't make them responsible for the way that we behave. We are in control of ourselves and ourselves alone, just like we're not in control of what other people do. So, yeah, that's what I believe, like, first and foremost. However, I do believe in loving your neighbor, right?
Mhm.
And so the way that I feel like women dress should be based on what's appropriate for where they are, right? You
Mhm.
know, it's not about general like rules, like strict, rigid rules. I mean, it's kind of a general rule to be loving.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
if the way that you're dressing is truly being inconsiderate and unloving of a person or a people group, then you should do something else, you know? Like if you walk up in LA dressed in very little clothing, no one's gonna bat an eye. Like they're just not because yeah, that's everybody, you know? It's warm, it's always good weather, you know, and also they tend to just wear less and or tighter clothing over there because that's how things are. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. That's just what it is. And
Yeah.
you know, if you live in Nashville, you're kind of in between. You know, a lot of that is acceptable in certain settings, but not acceptable in other settings. And I think it also depends on what your intentions are in your heart. And I will say that for me, that's a big thing. What is my intention with the way that I am dressing? Am I intending to entice? Because, I mean, I don't believe that's right. If I'm intending to entice, that is not loving,
Mhm.
you know, especially if I'm out and about with like people who, you know, are in a relationship with someone else and maybe they do struggle with, you know, controlling their thoughts and their desires and directing them at the person that they're with. And it's loving to both, you know, my brother and my sister to not intentionally entice, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so that's what I believe. It's not about, you know, me and my body and what about me and my rights. And I feel like there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
Christian people, that's not biblical. I'm going to say it one more time. Doesn't apply to anyone else. Christian people, to think about you and your rights constantly and how other
Mhm.
people are always infringing upon your rights is not biblical.
Yeah.
I'm sitting back now. This is very confrontational. Yeah. So yeah, I could look at it that way. Well, you shouldn't objectify me because my body isn't an object. If you're thinking of me as a sex object, then or lusting after me, then that's your fault because you shouldn't be treating me that way.
Yeah.
That's partly true. But if I want them to look at me that way, and I'm genuinely sending that message of look at me in a sexual way,
Yeah.
like there's a huge difference between wearing less clothing and wearing like intentionally enticing clothing in my opinion. If I'm running in shorts and a sports bra and it's 80 degrees outside but I'm going for a run, it's really on you, man. Like it's hot out. You wouldn't wear a shirt if you were a guy, probably unless
Probably
you
not.
wanted to.
I mean, I would, because I don't want to subject anyone to this. But
but that's the idea, like having that expectation that because I am a woman and I have breasts that I should submit myself to something really, like being genuinely uncomfortable and overheat myself because I'm running outside. And then other people would say, well, don't run outside. And I'm like, you get to run outside. I should be able to run outside. Now it's like that is just genuinely unloving toward me and not just like you're infringing upon my rights, when I'm also messing with yours. Like it's more like you are genuinely telling me I cannot do something that I should be able to do, like running trails, like running in God's creation, running outside because maybe that's the best way that I stay motivated to do it.
mm-hmm.
Maybe it feels better on my knees, whatever. And while I'm not saying you have to as a woman not wear a shirt, like if it's hot outside and I don't want to wear a shirt because it's hot outside and I'm running, that shouldn't be a moment where you were sexualizing me. I'm in a moment of like working out, taking care of my body, and being athletic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
yeah, there's a strong double standard there, which is extremely cultural and not biblical from any stance that I've seen. I mean, like the Bible clearly talks about not doing stuff to intentionally cause your brother to stumble or to fail. But I mean, there's nothing in there about specifically the types of clothes. I mean, there are things about clothes, but if we're going to go by that, then we should all probably be wearing like what is essentially togas and stuff. And then, I should probably have a beard, but just like a lot of different things that all just kind of tie together that aren't set in stone. And other cultures throughout human civilization have had points where they couldn't cared less about any of that stuff. But at the same time, don't show your ankles, so
right.
I feel like that's a cultural thing that's really created a strong double standard that I think is extends beyond the clothing thing. I think like especially with this example in particular, it's something that has impacted the courts, because we talk about we've had those times where people are like, well, you kind of brought it upon yourself, you shouldn't address that way, were you provoking this, asking these questions of women who are coming with complaints of abuse, and then having these, well, what were you wearing? Well, who cares? That's not the point. The point was a human was violated, was taken advantage of, was abused, and was forced upon, and that has nothing to do with what they were wearing. Someone lost their control or gave up their own self-control for their own selfish needs, and that's something, I don't know, maybe you can speak more to that.
Well, I mean, it has a lot to do with my job and my last job as well, where I was a victim advocate for um, sexual assault survivors. Um, and that is something that I talked with them a lot about. Some of them genuinely believed that if I hadn't done this, then this wouldn't have happened to me.
Hmm.
And I had to um, just help them see, if they wanted to, um, in a gentle way, hey, it doesn't matter what you did. It does not um, justify violence against you. Because again, we are all in control of ourselves. So when somebody does something like that to you, it's because of the evil in their own heart and not anything that you've done. So, and especially because this kind of thing tends to happen multiple times to certain kinds of people, genuinely, because they're just nice. They're nice and they don't think that they get the same kind of respect as other people, but they're willing to give it. And so people are predatory. Like the people who end up perpetrating those kinds of things are predatory. They look for that kind of person who's just going to allow their boundaries to be trampled, right? Yeah. And so because of that, because we know that, people think, well, just set some boundaries and don't be that person anymore. And it's like, I don't think you understand that that's not what the problem is. Go talk to the people who abuse and tell them to stop abusing and taking advantage of those who are vulnerable, because we're all vulnerable in some way at some point in our lives. And it looks different for each of us. But if you are the kind of person who looks for vulnerabilities that you may have power and control over them, that's really, it's just evil. It's an evil thing. So, I feel like Christian culture, and I will say a lot of, it is Christian culture in general, I feel like, but if we're talking about Southern Evangelical culture, I think they base a lot of whether or not a woman specifically deserved it off of what was she doing, where was she, and did she know the kind of people that she was around. So you know, like, you didn't exercise wisdom in hanging out with these kinds of people when you went to that bar, and you shouldn't have been in a bar in the first place. I actually, this was not during my time as an advocate, but it was sometime in the past where that organization had a case with a client who she got to the point of actually having a trial, which is actually very rare, people. Anytime you see somebody convicted of rape, it's because they had hard evidence, okay? Because most of these cases never even go to trial. So the moment that you question whether or not they actually did it, just know that. Just know that it's extremely rare for them to even get to the place where they are in a jury trial. So anyways, they actually did get to a trial, and the judge asked the perpetrator to the stand, and he admitted it. He admitted to raping. But because the jury knew that the client / victim had been at a bar and had alcohol, they declared him not guilty. Yes. So you have an example of somebody who actually admitted to committing a crime, but because of what she did, they believed it to be her fault.
Because she drank?
Yeah, and she was at a bar. Yeah, right? You're like, I think I need a drink now.
Yeah, I think I need something stronger.
Right?
That pisses me off.
Yeah, it's extremely upsetting. And that's the kind of thing that causes people in general, because this is not just a women's issue, really. And people also need to know that. to not come forward. The fear of not being believed or taken seriously is, well, it's not really just a fear, it's a fact a lot of the time. So, if you have a friend who approaches you and says, "This is something that happened to me," please don't ask them questions and interrogate them about the circumstances surrounding the crime committed against them. Just love them and believe them. And ask how you can help. Sorry, I'm just like, I've not been coughing at all, but I feel like as soon as we get on here, I'm like, I've got phlegm.
Phlegm. Oh my gosh. I'm still processing what we just were talking about. So feel free to cough while I continue to try and wrap my mind around some of this. Yeah, that is that makes me so angry.
Yeah.
Sorry. I feel like this is this might be a good transition point to talking about our current culture, church culture, and how it has how it might play a role in perpetuating some of these abuses, because I think with the way that Puritan culture, the way purity theology has influenced the West, particularly in America, it impacts us in that way. You know, like even if you're surrounded by people who aren't against drinking and against alcohol,
Right.
there still is some element of the way that we react to people and respond to them that has been influenced by the Puritan culture. And I think that we would be amiss not to mention some of the recent discoveries concerning different church leaders, because it seems to be consistent that a lot of major church leaders, including the recently deceased Ravi Zacharias, is harrowing for the church. It's devastating for a lot of people to discover these people who are being regarded as incredible spiritual leaders, to discover that they've not only had not like even just like a stumble, not even like a moment of weakness, but an active lifestyle of abuse. And so what is your response to some of that's been going on lately, particularly with the discovery of Ravi Zacharias?
Yeah. So I loved listening to Ravi Zacharias. I didn't necessarily grow up listening to him. It was just through my honestly fairly recent interest in apologetics in the last couple of years that I started to binge watch Ravi, because I was like, wow, this is incredible. Like just the way that God is using him. And there was so much truth in the things that he said that you could go back and like verify,
Yeah.
You can't say things like that on a big stage without having something to back you up. Right.
Yeah.
And so, I deeply respected him. And then when I heard the news, I mean, I really was devastated, because I had been recently listening to a lot of his talks. And so it was very painful for me, and difficult, and especially in light of what I do. You know, there's a huge, and you said it, there's a huge difference between having an affair with a consenting person and having struggles because of temptation.
Yeah.
And like that's one thing, that's everybody. Okay. We all have struggled in that way at some point in our life, to varying degrees. And so I can have compassion for that. And not that I don't have compassion for this even now. It's just one is predatory and one is not. He used his authority as a spiritual leader and as an employer to sexually abuse and harass these women that worked in his spa. And that, only God knows whether he truly repented and what steps he took to rectify the situation. I mean, it didn't seem like from the news, and I'm not super, I don't know all the details. I'm not super informed, but it doesn't sound like he took any steps to apologize to the women.
Yeah.
So that bothers me. I don't know that is, I don't know that doesn't mean that there wasn't true repentance on his end.
Sure.
But clearly upon his deathbed, it wasn't a priority. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to say what happened. What I do know is that regardless of what he did, God used him. And I would like to point that out to anybody who's listening or will see this. God still used him, and the things that he said cannot be canceled out because of what he did. If that were the case, we would all be in trouble with God, right? If anything that we said or did canceled out what God did through us, or what he wanted to do through us, or our salvation for that matter.
Yeah, the truth is the truth regardless of who says it.
Yeah. So
yeah, I think what stands out to me is something that seems rather consistent. I'm afraid I don't have any other examples offhand, though. There seems to be an element of trying to push things under the rug a little bit. So, we know that his ministry received some complaints and stuff, and then they kind of danced around an investigation, and even his own denomination, which I can't recall off the top of my head, but it's also the same denomination that Phil Vischer and Sky Jitani from the Holy Post are a part of. And they were expressing their frustration with a half-baked investigation. Go in, got pushed back, asked for the phone, refused to hand it over, and they're like, oh, well, I guess we'll call it good, when there was clear flags of problems there. There was no accountability. And that should have come out a long time ago to help prevent other people from being taken advantage of for this, abuse. But I agree with you that doesn't negate the arguments he made or the things that he said, at least from a philosophical standpoint. It just makes it really hard sometimes to hear truth under the muck of behavior and stuff. So I think something that was really, because we see some of this happening, and I mentioned it to you before, one of the episodes of the Holy Post that I was watching with Sky Jitani asked a really compelling question for me. Is our ministry culture simply enabling this behavior, or is it becoming a breeding ground for it? Is it coming to the point where it's creating some of the problem rather than just allowing it to happen? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Clearly, you can tell that I'm chomping at the bit, because my whole demeanor changed. I was like, but yeah, oh my goodness. So I may have said this to you before, but I really feel like purity culture really, in a very different way than the world at large, facilitates the objectification of people in general, the opposite sex, but I would say especially women.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, just the way that churches, like, we have our separate, Wednesday night group sometimes, or we separate the girls from the boys at youth. And I mean, even at the church that you went to, that I visited a few times when we were in college, they had the youth group sit together, but the boys were on one row and the girls were on another. And I thought, that seems absurd. And I'm not sure why they're doing that. But if it's because they're afraid of, like, the interactions that they will have, like, they won't be able to focus on the sermon or whatever, like, they're not teaching them how to have focus and self-control.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that I think is a really big problem. We are shirking our responsibilities to have self-control
Yeah.
and to regulate ourselves, and we're making it the other gender's responsibility to do that, to regulate my emotions. I'm not strong enough to be around you, and I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to break any rules, so you have to go over there. But that
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. Like, part of what, like, God knows that we're going to make mistakes. Making a mistake is not the end of the world. We have to, like, even if for some reason, this is kind of really extreme, but if for some reason being around the opposite sex causes you to sin in some way, and they're not even doing anything, you need to
Mm-hmm.
look within yourself, and you need to ask God to assist you and to help you and to work through all of those things with you in what's going on, because that's not
Yeah.
freedom. You are not free.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
constantly having to watch your back like that, and not be around people. I don't know. I just think that it's crazy. And we've taught women that men's desires are their responsibility. And I don't know, this may sound like borderline inappropriate for this podcast, but I was talking with one of my friends, one of my roommates actually, the other night, and we were talking about men in sweatpants and basketball shorts. Like, and we're or dress pants sometimes, especially, sorry everybody, like, if you're up on stage preaching and you decide to sit down, like, creates like a pocket. And it's not that anybody is trying to sit there and, like, look. It's more like, you know like, are you aware, are you aware? And nobody asks, like, nobody seems to care. You know what I mean? Like, we're asked not to do a bunch of things, but nobody seems to care about how other things may affect us. Like, hey, if it went both ways, might not hate this so much. At least there's equal consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but um, you know, I stand by that we should all be in control of ourselves, but loving towards others, right? So, it's not something that I feel is frequently talked about, but there are things that impact women as well, and things that we notice as well. And I feel like men are not as considerate towards what can impact us, um, as, heterosexual women, right? So, yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I recognize it. We were talking, you mentioned earlier about guys' Bible studies and feeling like they were more, what was the term you said? Like more like actually studying the Bible.
Yeah.
And I don't know, for me, I have a slight tendency to disagree with that based off of my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like a lot of it is often like talking about how to be a man, but a lot of it is influenced by purity culture. Like having this, keeping your eyes, averted, making sure you're guarding your eyes and being strong enough not to be seduced, which to a degree feels like pushing stuff onto women as well. It's like you're telling me something about women, and like there was that like I think we mentioned it recently. We were talking about it, the way that churches talk about the Jezebel spirit as being the female desire to manipulate, control, and seduce men, and that was something I heard a lot growing up. Was there was that women wanted to control men, and you had to do whatever you could to make sure that didn't happen. So, if someone like a woman is pursuing a place in political leadership, whether it's like a mayor or a governor or something, that is a woman trying to usurp her authority to try and control men, not because they desire to lead or they have skills in it. It's like they just want to be in control, and that is my experience with the church culture that we grew up in personally. And I felt like what the heaviness of the male Bible study and how it's all about being a strong man and having an adventure and a beauty to win and like blah 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 and all this other stuff, and you have to be this kind of a leader, you have to be the one to take charge and rush into battle and all this other crazy crap that is really emotional but not really deep at all for me.
Yeah. I will say that when I was talking about like the way that church treats women's and men's Bible studies, that they treat men's Bible studies as if they're more deeply theological. But although I've never been a part of one, my understanding from your perspective and others is that it's not necessarily, that it does revolve around a lot of that and what a man's responsibilities are, right? Which, as you and I have talked about, a lot of those things are not even really biblical.
Yeah.
It's just this idea of like what we think men should be. And it also gives women an incorrect idea of what men should be as well. And impacts heterosexual women's attractions to men. Like they look for a certain kind of man that is more masculine.
Yep.
Masculine, right? And that's not fair, and it's not what God intended. It's just not.
Yeah, there's a huge push, I think, in the evangelical church as a whole to really point out the gender roles and gender differences. Like there's almost like this strong need to polarize and separate and be, men should be extremely masculine, and if they're not living extremely masculine, they're not manly enough, they're not doing their job right, which is something I experienced. I mean, I grew up thinking that I wasn't manly enough, I wasn't masculine enough because I was a more emotional person, and I wouldn't consider myself an effeminate person at all, but I may have more like a higher empathy ceiling and like more sympathetic, and I can be more emotionally sensitive to things, sure, but that doesn't mean I'm any less of a man. But that's kind of what I heard growing up in the church and what I experienced also just from my family life. That was something that came from both, and because to some degree, separating what you learn from home and separating what you learn from Sunday morning church is extremely difficult because they kind of, like the Venn diagram just kind of covers. But I think shoot, I lost my train of thought. And also like along the same lines, expecting women to be extremely effeminate and to, I don't know, kind of fawn to the actions of men, or to just that constant talk of be submissive, be submissive, be submissive. Whatever the man of the church decide, that will override your vote all the time. And like churches having councils of strictly men. The church I went to had a church council that was all men. Because in their minds, that's the way it had to be.
Right.
And then we also have churches where they're constantly hiring men, but they're also hiring men who are married to try and basically get that free labor, free input, free, like, take advantage of the marriage and stuff. And I think that's completely unfair to women, and I think that's deeply ingrained in the culture. So there's a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about before we wrap up. Is that you provided recently, in our recent conversation, a really unique perspective for me that I had not thought about. Because I think, given some of your family background and some of your cultural background, you have a unique perspective to be able to separate some of the Southern culture from evangelical culture. Because you mentioned to me that you have, half of your family's Hispanic. And so you have evangelicalism from two different worldviews, the white Southern perspective and then kind of the Puerto Rican perspective. And so I would love it if you kind of shared a little bit about that experience and how you could see the differences between both sides of this evangelical spectrum.
Sure. So yeah, I'm familiar with the idea that men are told to suppress their emotions. I've seen that, but on one side of my family and not the other. And I've not seen that from my Hispanic side of the family. So my dad is Puerto Rican, as you know. I'm just telling everybody else. And so from his side of the family, I can say that every one of the men on that side of the family I've seen cry or get teary-eyed multiple times throughout my childhood and adulthood, because there's no suppression of emotion of any kind. Everything is out there. All of the emotions are, worn on their sleeves. It's just not something that I've seen. So, I mean, I've seen my dad cry a lot, like not necessarily for, because he was sad, but also because he was sad. My dad's just very emotional, but he's also very masculine. And so for me, I didn't grow up, at least on that side, having this idea that being emotional wasn't masculine. Like you could still be, have this air of like machismo, but still, which is like macho, and still cry. And also be very romantic and loving and still be a man too. Outwardly romantic and loving and still be a man. So again, sorry.
Which is vastly different for me, because I think like I can only definitively say I've seen my dad cry twice in my life. I mean, that's over 30 years. I can only think of 2 times where I could see tears. And one of those times was disrupted by him apologizing for crying and running out the house to keep us from seeing him cry. And I, apart from that, like I've heard my mom talk about him crying a couple of times over different situations concerning family and stuff like that, but to actually see it was extremely rare. Yeah, a very different experience.
Yeah. So, yeah, and my dad's side of the family, like, they all grew up in church for the most part, and church was very much a part of their lives. So for them, like it wasn't the church that taught them that either. That you had to be strong and you had to be assertive, but that didn't mean that you couldn't feel. Like those were not the same thing, which I do believe is healthier. But again, that is speaking from the perspective of not just all Latin American culture. That is specifically my Puerto Rican family, and many Puerto Ricans I know in general. So I want to be clear. I'm not saying that all Hispanic men don't feel the need to suppress their emotions. I want to say specifically for what I've seen from my family and my perspective, that has been the case. So, yeah. I feel like there's a lot about this subject that is really difficult to touch on in even just an hour. And so,
yeah,
as you guys are listening, I want you to know that I'm aware that we didn't touch on every subject, and this is not even, I've not even given my full opinion on each of the questions, but with such limited time, can't go too much into detail. And we did stray a couple of times, but
we did, but that's what we do, and I prefer that. It's, I'm sitting here talking to friends. That is what my podcast is. I am talking to my friends about spirituality and life and experience. So I would rather keep it casual and let it, wander from time to time. So I think that's a whole lot better than some of these talks where it's like so scripted, like boom, 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 boom. Okay, sure. Yeah. To a degree, you need structure. I felt like we had plenty of structure because there really is. There's a lot to talk about just on this this subject matter. Like we could and should have other conversations where we dive deeper into more specifics.
I mean, we didn't even get to talk about how, as a child, I wanted to be a boy because I thought boys were better. We just
talk about that.
Oh,
because when I was a kid, I had the exact opposite experience. I wanted to be a girl because I thought they were better. I thought girls were the more valued, more like they're the beautiful ones. They're the precious, the sweet, the colorful, the artistic, the beauty, stuff like that. And from my perspective, being a man meant being that overly assertive and aggressive and more wild and rigid life and stuff that I just didn't enjoy. Things that are like really appalling to me, or like not really appalling, but like very much, no. So yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, as quickly as I can. I think that you and I know that, and throughout the course of our friendship, that you and I kind of are opposites in that way, where you enjoy all the things that you just said, like the artistic, the creative. And while I do in a way, I really gravitate towards the adventure, wild, athletic, like
sports. Sports.
And I have really valued strength, and not just of character, but in physicality, right? Physical strength. And for myself, not necessarily for like men in my life. And I think that, that is probably obvious in who I've chosen to, talk to romantically and or date, that's not something I've personally cared about for anyone else except myself. And when you're told that you are not that and that you cannot have that as a woman, it's really hard. Because it seems to me that, the boys always had what I wanted. I didn't want pink shoes. I didn't want, pink and purple and bright yellow. And like, I love all those colors now, but I hated them then for what they represented to me. And it was what felt like prison.
Yeah.
So to speak. I wanted red because that is actually my most favorite color. Who knows me knows that. Bright, like fire engine red is my favorite color. And there just weren't any like little girl shoes that were red. I'm not really sure what it is that, little kids' outfits are so
pastel-y.
No, like the boys and girls' outfits when they're small are so gendered. So gendered. And it gets more like fluid as you get older and get to make choices, even with colors. But when like kids are small, like when do you ever see that they're not super gendered and put in a box? I just think that it's really strange. I don't really understand it. It's like, are you really, you're really pushing these things on these kids. And I say that even coming from an admittedly more conservative perspective on that.
Yeah.
Like that's still a reality to me regardless. And so go ahead.
I was just thinking about what you were just saying with the, like, I catch myself sometimes still feeling the need to really push and separate and put them into a box. Because like the other day, one of my closest friends was talking about how his wife is pregnant, and they're, and we were talking with coworkers, and they're like, "Well, do you know what it is yet?" He's like, "Oh no, we're gonna wait. We're gonna be surprised." And I'm like, "But there's painting to do. There's Oh wait,
right?
Not necessary." Like, I caught myself in that moment being, oh shit.
Yeah.
But also, like, on the same lines, when I was a kid, my favorite color was pink. But I was almost embarrassed to tell people that because that seemed like to cause dissonance for people. Like, oh, but that's a girl's color. Girls like pink. Like, but I like pink. Pink is great. It's the color of sunsets and flowers and all these like really cool things. Like, there's beautiful things that are pink. Why can't I like pink? And it got to the point where, like, mentally, I was just like, I really need to not like pink. Because it's like, and I'm saying that this is wrong. I don't think this is healthy or accurate or true to the way the world should function. But this is what it was, is pink was a girl's color. Girls like pink. And blue is a boy's color. But it was also a little bit of a kind of a double standard. Girls can like whatever color they want. Any of them can be their favorite. But when it comes to guys, I felt like not really allowed to like the feminine colors. So
yes,
blue became my favorite, and it has been ever since. But I mean, it's a great color, so it's okay.
Yeah, oh gosh, there's so much that we could talk about right now, but I'm really trying to keep it as short as possible, because otherwise I will just like ramble. But yeah, so boys had everything that I wanted. And that was one of the things like having to do with color. But I was allowed to like those things, especially as I got a little bit older. It was more acceptable, to like things that boys liked. You just were never going to be as good as them, right?
Mm-hmm.
For boys to like anything that a girl liked was just no. It was not a thing that boys could do. Although, I remember when my dad he got this Ralph Lauren button-up shirt that was just like pink, like baby pink. And it was my favorite shirt of his. And partly because, with his dark complexion, it just a really nice contrast, the bright pink with the darker skin. And so he looks good in pastel-y colors. But that for me told me that it was okay. Like that my perspective of boys shouldn't be that, they should be restricted to that. And so he wears pinks and lavenders and turquoise and, and again, that probably has something to do with like the Latin American thing where it's just like, they're very colorful anyway. We're very colorful anyway. And, colors aren't as gendered in a way, at least not in my experience. Like it's just bright, colorful everything. Oh, you probably hear my dog in the background, so I'm sorry.
Barely, it's fine.
Okay, good.
Dogs are great.
So yeah, I feel like and I don't want to say this in a way that is offensive, but I feel like a white American culture, which I'm also a part of, so I guess I can speak to it, tends to be, I'm sorry.
You good? Heard that whine.
Yeah, she loves me. I'm visiting home, and I don't see her very often. But is it okay if I turn this camera off real quick and grab her?
Yeah.
Just 1 second.
Yeah. That was entertaining.
Oh my dogs. Guys.
Puppers. Show me the puppy.
I'm back. Sorry.
Hey, welcome back.
This is Howard. Stephen, you know Howard.
Oh. Hey, baby. Hey. Hi. Puppy.
Good boy.
It is not giving me any bother.
Anyways. So, back to what I was saying. When your dog knocks over your light. Well, at least you can see.
I can't let my cat down here because he'll just knock over everything. So, or he'll try to climb up the wall, make a bunch of noise, screams. Sometimes he comes and sits down right next to me and looks up to me and just starts whining at me. And he's attention seeky. He's adorable.
My dog is forceful in expressing her desires, and they will be met. Like if she wants to be around me, that's pretty much what she gets. Unfortunately, I'm no dog trainer, and so training that out of her is not an option. So yeah, no, y'all can't tell, but I've got one that is Howard and one that is Piper, who is facing me right now, sitting on top of a bed. So, but anyways, like I was saying, Hispanic culture, very colorful. Colors aren't super gendered. Yeah. So, and there's definitely more to the story of like me, wanting to be a boy. And I will say that for me, that did not translate into feeling like I was a boy, because I do think that those things are different. It's that I simply wanted to be able to express myself in the way that I felt that I was. But I wanted to be a girl while doing it. It's just, it didn't seem like that was an option. So.
I really appreciate you sharing that. So as we wrap up, a couple of quick questions. It doesn't have to be long. Uh, I want to just real quickly get from you um, maybe one thing that you feel like the church growing up did that was a disservice to you, and then something that you feel like was very much to your benefit, something that you are glad that you saw or glad that you've experienced. So if you could just do back to back.
Go.
Puppy.
Go Howard. So one thing that the church did well for me was a lot of things. I think, I mean, obviously for me, I learned a lot about God in the Bible, and I didn't learn everything perfectly. I learned things through a very cultural lens, but the basics still came through. Praise be to God for that, right?
Yeah.
And that's who I thank for that. I don't thank the church as much as I thank God for allowing me to, filtering that for me and saying, this is what's important. This is who I am. And the fact that I am loved by God and valued by God regardless of what I am. You know what I mean? I am loved all the same. I'm loved just as much. I think the church inadvertently taught me that because I am female, that I am less able to be used by God and less important even. And so because I had a great desire to be used by God, that was just devastating to me, because how else can I, what greater way can I love God than to be used by him? And so from a very young age, I think I was 10 years old, I cried and actually fell into a very deep depression at 10 years old, because I believed that I was not as loved by God as boys and grow up to be great servants of God, but that I was destined to be just a wife of a person who served, and that my service to God would always be how I loved my husband and how I raised my children.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, you guys, if you as a woman, that's all you want and that's what you feel God has called you to, that's not a lesser calling. It's not. It's a harder thing to just in my opinion, to do those things, because they're so close to you and so personal to you, and you can become deeply emotional about those things because you care so much. And because of that, things can get heated in your marriage relationship. Things can, it's easier to do wrong. It's easier to do wrong in those areas of your life. Whereas in ministry, out in the world with people who don't know you personally very well, they get kind of a different side of you. And it's easier to have those emotional boundaries in a lot of ways, because it's not as personal to you, and your level of care, I don't care what anybody says, is lesser. So your emotions tend to run wild when it comes to your marriage and your kids. And so if you dedicate your whole life to that being your place of ministry, more power to you. It is not lesser in any way. However, being told that because you are a woman, that is a lesser calling and that you are to remain in that box is not right. And that's, I don't see that is what God intended for women. So yeah, that's one thing that was really difficult for me growing up that sent me into a deep depression. Um, and eventually I came out probably sometime around 14, where that finally ended. Um, and uh, yeah, like I learned that God loved me and valued me as I was, and He could do whatever He wanted through me, and that He is not limited um, in any way by my gender or what the church thinks or what other people think.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Amanda, thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing your experience, which I think for some people will be very difficult to say everything that you've said. Um, so, yeah, thank you very much for being here.
yeah. Thanks for having me on, and I hope that I was able to give clear explanations as to, what I think, and I hope that everybody who is consuming this podcast enjoys this. And yeah, so again, thank you so much, and thank you for having this. I think it's really important that people like us who, we're not a part of like big church ministries or organizations, like to get our life stories and our opinions on these things out, because everybody needs to hear them. Our stories are just as important, if not more. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed this conversation and want to participate in it, feel free to like, subscribe, ring that little bell, and leave some comments. Share your thoughts. Maybe you have a similar experience. Maybe you have a different experience. If you have questions for future episodes, please leave them in the comments. But until next time, remember that life is short, and there is but little time to gladden the hearts of those who travel with us. So be quick to love and make haste to be kind. And until next time, this is Soul and Tonic. Bye!